Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Welcome to the Superhumanize podcast. I'm Ariana Summer, your host, and today we're honored to host Dr. Anodea Judith, a masterful weaver of psychological depth and spiritual wisdom. Anodea has been called a prophet for our time. She is a groundbreaking thought leader whose passion for the realization of human potential matches her concern for humanity's impending crises. Her fervent wishes that we wake up in time. She's the founder and director of Sacred Centers and holds Masters and Doctoral degrees in psychology and human health. Anodea is also a celebrated speaker, therapist, global teacher, and best-selling author. She has written several seminal books on chakras and personal development, which have been translated into 28 languages and continue to inspire an international audience. Today, she brings us insights from her latest work, Goddess, Blessed Reunions with the Feminine Face of the Divine, a compelling exploration into the resurgence of the divine feminine in our collective consciousness. This book invites us to rethink not just the spiritual implications of the divine feminine, but its necessity in our current social fabric in order to usher in the next evolution of humanity. Anodea, it is wonderful to connect with you today. Welcome to the Superhumanized podcast.
Thank you, Ariana. Really a delight to be here and meet you.
Truly, and I have just mentioned it offline before we hit record. I have been immersed in your most recent book, Goddess. It has brought tears to my eyes on quite a few occasions. The stories are very powerful. These are very powerful accounts of encounters with the divine feminine. And I would rather let you give us your perspective on this book. Tell us briefly, how did you get inspired? You curated this book. You also wrote the introductory parts of it, as well as a story inside the curated selection of narratives. What was the inspiration and what was the process of putting this together, Anodea?
I actually started this book after I was ordained as a priestess back in 1985. So that was almost 40 years ago. And I started writing a book about the goddess, and then life took me in various directions, and I didn't finish it at the time. I printed it out. I put it in a notebook. 4 or 5 chapters were done, and I put it on my shelf and forgot about it. And then I was cleaning my office one day and I found it and I went, I wonder if you're ever going to do anything with this. And I said, Goddess, if you want me to write this book, then you let me know. And I folded it up and I put it back on the shelf. And about 2 weeks later, I met Ariel Patricia in a Zoom breakout session in one of my evolutionary leaders calls. And I introduced myself and she said, oh, I want to talk to you about a book. I want someone to write a book about the goddess and I think it should be you. And so it came to me. It came to me. I've said to the goddess, if you want me to write this, then let me know and give me a sign. What more is a sign than someone saying, coming from the publishing world, saying, I want you to write a book about the goddess. So I took some of what I had. Of course, I'd written it so long ago, I had to brush that all up. And there's a certain pattern to the Common Sentience series. Like you say, I wrote the first part, which is all the theory. I wrote the first and the last story in the story section. And then I wrote the third section, which is practices. Mm-hmm. And here's the book for people who might want to see it.
Yes, and it is a beautiful book and a book that is so important, especially in our times. Mm-hmm. And Anodea, you mentioned that you also wrote the introductory part. Something that really captivated me there is how you talk about the triple, or actually the quadruple goddess aspect. Now, the maiden, the mother, and the crone, and also the queen. Tell us more about this, please.
The goddess has always been known as the triple goddess, which is maiden, mother, and crone, reflecting the stages of a woman's life, but also the cyclic nature of the goddess, that there's beginnings and middles and endings to things. We have a morning, we have a day, and we have a nighttime. We have spring, summer, and winter. We have birth, life, and death. So the goddess reflects all of that. But as I was writing about the maiden, mother, and crone, today, there are so many women that say, I'm done with my children, or I never had children, and I don't feel old enough to be a crone yet. I want to go out in the world and work and give to the community. And so that's the queen. And so I really felt compelled to add a queen phase.
I love that so much, and it resonated deeply with me. And I actually can't wait to share this also with my women's circle, Ma Circle, that I co-founded with my dear friend Luba. Shout out here. We meet twice a month in person. And I know this particular queen archetype will resonate with so many. Something else that I found really compelling is if we talk about Joseph Campbell and how he highlighted the vital role of myths in understanding our existence. This is also something you talk about. And in a world that's really driven so much by rationalism in so many places, how can we reconnect with these essential myths, and particularly through the divine feminine, to actually regain the sense of wonder and direction?
Absolutely. Joseph Campbell was one of my heroes, and he's always been an influence and read so much of what he's written to bring myth alive. Because once upon a time, the myths and the stories were what held together the people. It gave them the reason to live. It explained things from their perhaps primitive understanding, but it knitted together the fabric of community. And then when we discovered science, admittedly, we took a giant step forward, and we stepped forward, let's say, on our right leg, and we immersed ourselves in the rational and the logical and the scientific. And then myths became denigrated. Oh, that's only a myth. It actually came to mean lie. That, like, to say something is a myth is to say that it's a lie. A myth is true on a deeper level. It may not be true on an exact level, but it's true on an allegorical level. But what I say is that we can't take the next step forward without our left leg. So we are stuck. And until we reclaim the mythologies and actually create a new myth for our time that gives us navigating this incredibly tumultuous time on the planet, it gives us a meaning, it gives us a direction. And to me, the new myth is that we are becoming the parents of the future. But we cannot parent without equality between the masculine and the feminine, because it really takes two parents, and two parents working in partnership. So this is not about women dominating or taking over, but it's about elevating the feminine to a place where she has her divine rights, and the contribution of the feminine, which is love, beauty, tenderness, compassion, collaboration. These are ways that the feminine works. These principles and these values are so needed in our world at this time.
Yes, 100%. And I really love that what you're talking about is basically an eye-to-eye collaboration that is giving birth to this new world. It's not about women dominating men. That's just the other side of the same coin.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, and this is also something that somebody else I really have a great affinity towards, and I revere her message. She talks about the partnership principle. It's not about domination. It's not one gender dominates the other, one race dominates the other. It's about collaboration and basically birthing this new world that is based on collaboration and equality in a sense also.
Absolutely. And it's based on relationship, how
Yeah.
we relate to each other, and how the masculine and the feminine relate to each other. They have to relate to each other, in my opinion, from a place of mutual respect. Each has gifts to contribute. And the masculine has given us many gifts. I often say men have a place, and men have a thing, and women have a place. And men have given us a world full of marvelous things: computers and cell phones and trains and airplanes and hospitals and televisions and the means to speak to each other right now. But in the process of creating all these things, they've trashed the place. And it is time now that we clean up the place and say, hey, we've got enough things for a while. Get back to the place, get back to the field that holds it all before that field is destroyed.
Yes, that Anodea, that ties right into ancient Taoist philosophies where we learn about the balance of yin and yang, essential for harmony. And in many spiritual traditions, this healing or healing in general is also seen as a restoration of balance. So, how does integrating the divine feminine, the goddess archetype, assist in healing this place and this world of 10,000 things?
When you use the word divine, what can be more important and more valuable than the divine, right? That kind of is above and beyond everything. And when we cut out half of the divine, we are cutting out half of the most important thing that we can relate to spiritually as an awakening species. I say that a religion without a goddess is halfway to atheism. And actually the word atheism was first designed, it came about in the Roman Empire. It was used for the early Christians because theism means the divine is in everything. It's in you, it's in me, it's in the trees outside my window, it's in my cat, it's in everything. And that's theism. The divine dwells within all things and within material things, nature. So when that was denied and God was something distant and abstract out there and not in here, the people who didn't believe that were called atheists. They were against theism. And so because they believed in only one God instead of a multiplicity of what we call immanence, there's a place for the transcendent. I've been a meditator for over 50 years. There's a place for the transcendent, but it doesn't necessarily get things done. It doesn't necessarily celebrate. It doesn't necessarily have that life force singing through you that wants to dance and make color and make art and make beauty, which I think is the realm of the goddess. And so when we deny that, we deny beauty and pleasure and love. And we have a world without that, a world that's black and white and harsh. And I think that this loss is what the world is suffering from right now.
Yes, Anodea, and that brings to mind if we look at some of the most repressive times in Christianity, where basically joy was yanked out of people's lives, or we look at other places in the world where people are forbidden to dance or to even keep songbirds. And this, when we impose this view of the divine, of being something basically unattainable and outside of yourself, and you are born bad and you're going to basically die bad, all you can do is try to make sure you're not going to go to hell. That is, for me, that brings hell on earth. And I personally have come to the conclusion that also on a different level, transcendence, yes, as you said, and there's a place for that. And also, we are here on earth to represent the divine, to sing, to dance, to create, to raise children, gardens, to whatever it is that through us can express the divine, expressed through us in the way that only each individuation of us can express it, is what we're here for. And I think that's what's often so lost and forgotten. Something, in order for us to get back in touch with this, it is necessary to have a intimate, a deeply personal experience, connection with the divine. And in your book, I find the narratives are so compelling because they are so personal. And they touch on very intimate encounters with the goddess, with the divine feminine. And I'd love to hear from you. Could you share a personal experience that deepened your understanding of the goddess Anodea?
Oh, certainly. One of the stories I tell in the book at the end of the story section was when I was much younger, probably 40 years ago, and or maybe more, 50. And I was making my living as a mural artist, painting large-scale public murals in places. And I was so poor. I was a poor, starving artist. I didn't even have a car. I just had a bicycle, and I carried my paint cans on the handlebars of my bicycle. And when it was raining, I hitchhiked or took a bus home. And so I was working on this project that was painting the inside of an old movie theater that was going to be turned into a shopping mall. And it was a huge project. And I had to work at night often. And the person who I was working for, who hired me, was a devotee of the guru Muktananda. And there was a big picture of Muktananda at the end of the hall that hung there every day. And I was into goddesses, and we had many discussions about it. But one night when it was raining and I was about to go home, it was pouring rain, he said, "Why don't you pray to the guru so that you get a nice ride home?" And I thought, "Oh, sure, I'm open to all things." So I looked at the picture and I said, "Please help me get home safely." And I put on my coat and I walked out just to miss the bus, just to see it going. In fact, it splashed water all over me. And so I thought it'll be 20 minutes before the bus comes. So I stuck out my thumb, and car after car went by. Nobody picked me up. So I went, so much for the guru. I should have asked the goddess. And so I did a little prayer in my mind. "Dear goddess, I'm sorry I didn't ask you first. Please give me a ride home. Help me get out of this rain." Immediately, a silver BMW came along with a beautiful woman, much like yourself, who picked me up, rolled down the window, and said, "Would you like a ride, honey?" And I said, "Sure." I stepped in, and the car was warm. My favorite jazz station was playing on the radio. I love jazz. And as she asked me where I was going, and she said, "Whenever it's raining," and this are her exact words, she said, "Whenever it's raining, I make a point to pick up women hitchhikers. It's how I pay my tribute to the goddess."
Oh my goddess. Hitchhiking with the goddess. I believe that is called,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And with that, she drove me all the way home.
How beautiful is that? And I mean, the synchronicities, it couldn't be more clear, right? And the goddess has many faces. In fact, when we really open our eyes, we see her everywhere, and we are also seen as such.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love this story.
I'm looking at her right now through the screen.
Likewise, and your presence is very deeply felt, and I feel deep gratitude for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm. And that being said, across cultures, the divine feminine takes so many forms and faces. We just to cite a couple, you have Kali in Hinduism, amongst many in Hinduism. You have Mary in Christianity. What universal qualities have you found in these countless depictions that basically resonate across so many different societies?
Really, the goddess represents aspects of society that we can break down. So there's always a goddess of love. There's always a mother goddess. There's always an ancient, more destructive goddess. That's Kali. But Kali, people who think of her as just destruction don't quite really understand her, because she's liberation. She only destroys what's in your way from spiritual realization. And then there's always maiden goddesses that are the spring. There's Kore from the Greek. There's Blodywood from the Welsh. There's Habandia from the Norse. There's many different ones. And so those are quite universal. And there were queens back then too. Queen is not just a modern term. Inanna was the queen of heaven and earth. Isis was the queen of all the gods. She was the Egyptian queen, the healer. So the goddess was considered the extreme queen, and that is common in many cultures too.
Beautiful. And that ties right back into the queen that we talked about before, and may give our audience also an avenue to step into that. And talking about queens, this also is, of course, about leadership. And as a member of the Evolutionary Leadership Council, Anodea, I'd like to know from you, how do you see feminine values shaping the future of leadership, and how can the narratives of the
Yeah.
divine feminine actually replace the conventional views of what power is and what leadership is?
Yes, I have taught and written a lot about that. And thank you for asking. This is, and you see the poster behind me. This is another creation of mine, the She Rises leadership cards. And these are archetypes of feminine leadership. And it's based on the idea that women lead differently than men, and they need different archetypes to guide them. I really noticed when Hillary Clinton was running for president in 2016, how the news articles portrayed her. They talked about her hemline. They said her voice was too harsh. She wasn't masculine enough to be commander in chief. Oh, she was too masculine. There was no place in the public's mind for a woman in that role of leadership, because we only think of leadership in masculine terms. But women lead differently than men. And so I said, what are the archetypes of women's leadership? And I came up with 38 of them. There's many more, but I stopped at 38. And I put them like the mystica. That's just what I opened to here, who is the one who really, in the patriarchal religion, stepped into a communion with the divine in her own way, maybe sheltered herself from the rest of society, stayed virgin her whole life, when she was the mystica. The oracle was one. The oracle priestesses in ancient Greece were the most respected members of society. Kings and generals traveled hundreds of miles to go have audience with the oracle priestesses, and whatever they said was taken as divine truth. Wars were started or ended according to what the priestess said while that oracle ran, and that was for many hundreds of years. And of course, we've lost that today. The oracle priestesses were raped and the temples were destroyed, and that was the end of that, and we lost this valuable source. Some are teachers. The counselor, most counselors are female, and so they're guides of the soul. Of course, the midwife, who is helping things come into being, and the benefactress, because when women come into money, they are more likely to share it. The shamana, we always say shaman, but there are women shamans as well. The activist, 60% of all women are activists.
I love this.
The empath, many women see them as empaths. They see that as a liability. Oh, I'm so sensitive. But actually, that sensitivity is a leadership quality in a world that honors it. Yeah. And of course, we have the maiden and the priestess. And each of these cards has an evocation, which is the archetype speaking directly in the I voice. Then I write about her in the she voice, which is the historical information or her standing in the world or what happened to her. And then on the back, and it's all written on the cards themselves, is the you. So when you work with the priestess archetype, she is asking you to step more deeply into the realm of the sacred. Your leadership may not be in the mundane world, but occurs on the inner planes. So there's a whole piece for that. I could read one of the evocations if you want. I even put myself in it as the visionary.
Yes. Would you, for me, just shuffle the cards and pull the one that's meant for me right now? I would love that.
I will. Do you have a question, or do you want to just think of a question?
Okay. Which aspect of my divine feminine self do I need to step into more fully right now?
Okay, here's what my hand went to. The creatrix.
Oh, okay.
And do you want to hear what she has to say?
Please.
I am the creatrix, the mistress of creativity. I am artist and maker, singer and dancer. I bring forth the unexpected. I give birth from my imagination, embellishing what is to show you what can be. The world is my canvas. Every act is a brushstroke. Every step is an eloquent dance. Every sound a note in the grand symphony. Come to me when you don't have what you want, and I will show you how to create it. Come to me when you can't see the way, and we will create the way. Come to me when you are pregnant with ideas, begging to be born, and we will bring them to fruition. I am the creatrix. I have worked for so long with so little that I can create the impossible with nothing.
That is beautiful. Thank you, Anodea. And I laugh because, oh gosh, because just in the last days, I was actually pondering about bringing more of my creativity out to the forefront, not just keep it hidden, but share it. And I just recently started doing a little bit more of that, literally within the last probably 3 days.
Oh, my goodness. So she's a rising star in your archetypal matrix.
Yes. So this was just perfect. Thank you so much. And it's something that when you were talking about Hillary Clinton, that evoked a thought in me, which I think is really pertinent to what's happening worldwide right now, where many actually struggle to connect with the divine feminine, whether it is as a leader, a world leader, in the sense of what Hillary Clinton represented, the possibility of. So there's many cultural or personal resistances there. What are the challenges that you have seen that people face with regards to this disconnect, and how can they be overcome?
Beautiful question. Part of what I write about in the book is the history of what happened to the goddess and how she was literally destroyed by the dominating patriarchal forces, and not just forgotten about and pushed away, but systematically oppressed, systematically forbidden. Women were killed for even uttering her name. The temples were destroyed, the statues were beheaded, the literature was destroyed. And then when we went into the Inquisition and women were burned at the stake, there was such fear that no one would dare mention her until over the generations, she was completely forgotten. When I grew up in a typical Christian family, I never had the concept that God could be a woman. I never had the concept that God could be feminine. And I asked my mother, Mommy, why is God always a he? She said, oh, that means everybody. But it doesn't. It really doesn't, because when the God is male, the male is God. And then that gives permission for a domination of women and a loss of all the feminine things that we need in this world. So many people feel afraid because that's in the intergenerational trauma. They feel deeply, just in their soul, they feel afraid to beat a drum. They feel afraid to chant or dance. They feel afraid that they are creating some kind of mortal sin to talk about polytheism, where there were gods and goddesses, because it was this one God. And if you don't believe this, you will be destroyed. And that goes deep in the collective psyche. So that's really the challenge. And not only do people have fear, but it's been so diminished. One of my considerations when I was asked to write this book in the sort of idea of all the books that I've written and where I was going is, so many people think, oh, that's just frilly, girly stuff, and dismiss it. I remember at a party when I was working on it, I walked up to a group of men who were having a deep philosophical discussion, and they knew me, and they said, oh, hi, Anodea, how are you doing? What are you working on now? And I said, I'm writing a book about the goddess. They said, oh, that's nice. And they went back to their conversation. And I thought, if I said I was writing a book about God, they probably would have stopped and gone deeper. But they just dismissed it out of hand as this silly thing that women do sometimes. And what I want to say is the goddess is not just for women. In the years that I spent in the pagan community that honors gods and goddesses, there were an equal number of men in that community. And they were happy men because they got to cavort with goddesses who treated them like a god. They were with women who knew who they were, who made their own money, who had their own power, and were not seeking to dominate or depend on someone to do things for them. They were goddesses in their own right. There was creativity and joy, and sacred sexuality was not a sin, but a sacrament. So they were happy men, very happy. I quote someone in the book, Patricia Monahan, who says the goddess religion does not only include men, it insists on them.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
And whenever a woman can express herself freely, creatively, intellectually, sexually, the world becomes a better place. Everybody has more fun. Hello?
That's right. That's right. What's not to like? Yeah. Whoever thought it was a sin to show a woman's breast, and it wasn't a sin to show people murdering each other on TV?
Okay.
A crazy turnaround of values.
Absolutely. And we still have this going on social media where you can show the clips of the most violent video games or all kinds of stuff. But oh my gosh, if an influencer dares to show her nipple, that will bring the world tumbling down. So we got to censor this and shadow ban her account. Or even women talking very openly about very natural processes, be it menstruation, be it giving home births, and also showing that. I see the most beautiful videos of these amazing, gorgeous, strong women who are at home, and they have maybe their doula next to them, and then they have their beloved, their partner next to them. And in some cases also the child that they already have born, who's maybe 4 years old. I saw one video with two siblings, and this beautiful mama is giving birth in the bathtub, and the children are witnessing this. There was a little boy and a little girl, and the children are elated. They're not frightened. They're seeing this and seeing their mother being so empowered and basically being a portal between the worlds, between the realms, and their sibling being brought in. And it's joyous. It's a celebration. There is zero fear, negativity. However, you look at some of the comments under these videos, I just can't believe, where people will be like, oh my God, that's disgusting. Oh my God, how can you do this to the children? Hello?
Children used to see birth all the time. They used to see birth. They used to see sex. People lived in one room. The whole family lived in a little one-room cabin. And they saw deaths, and they saw all the things of life. And this has been removed. And then the children get curious. They go online and they find it in violent pornography, and they think that's what it is. What is really worse?
Right. And then we wonder why there's so many cases of disconnection, depression, or close to 50% of all marriages in the US get divorced at some point, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So what I feel is really important in talking about reconnecting to the goddess, to the divine feminine, I think what's really important also, Anodea, is that the concept of finding the sacred in the mundane, which is also a theme in many spiritual traditions, and something mundane, even though it's an incredible event such as birth, it is mundane, it happens every day, it's beautiful. How can recognizing the goddess in daily life, daily routines, daily happenings transform our life and our worldview? How can we actually bring this in if we don't have it right now in our lives?
Yes, that's a really good point, because she is everything, and she is the daily thing. She was always a little statue that was on the hearth of every home. She was in the kitchen. She was in the bedroom. She was there in all the things. She was there in nursing the children and putting them to bed and cooking them breakfast. These are the things the goddess does. She multitasks. That's why she has so many arms in the Hindu tradition. So I think to just bring a moment of sacredness into your daily life, to wake up in the morning, I have an altar, I have Lakshmi on my altar and some other things, to just go and say, hello, thank you, and express gratitude. To say a prayer before you eat, to take a moment to look into your beloved's eyes and just share a moment and see the God and goddess in each other, that it is with us every day. We put church on Sunday, removed from the rest of life, and the rest of life was secular and mundane. We took the sacred out of everything. So it's to reestablish that the food you eat, the conversations you have, the love you make, it's all sacred celebration of the life force. And that's what we're meant to experience. I have a friend, Neil Rogan, he passed away recently, but he said, we don't need to raise hell to change the world. We just need to lower heaven and bring heaven down to earth. So I think the myth of why we're here on this planet and what we're here to do is to parent the future and create heaven on earth.
Yes. Beautiful. And I love that. We don't need to raise hell. We need to lower heaven. That's beautiful. I will use that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. There's another aspect too. The one is the personal. And of course, the experience with the divine is something very intimate and personal. However, I find to normalize that is also important. So you have actually profound experience also in educational settings. And I'm wondering, how can educational systems incorporate these principles to foster a more holistic learning environments that are also open to however people would choose to believe, if choose to believe?
We have to understand that our educational frameworks, the way we design the classroom and children going to school, started in the Renaissance when we had the printing press. And children needed to learn to read because that was the new thing. If you didn't learn to read, you weren't in the modern conversation at that time. And that coincided with a very strict, the Protestant Reformation was reacting against the Catholic excesses. And they were the ones that went into the strict, it's a sin to dance, it's a sin to wear color, it's a sin to make noise, it's a sin to play. They really went into that strictness. So that got overlaid with the way we taught children, which is sit still, everybody sit at their desk in a row, be quiet for hours at a time, learn to make little squiggles with a pencil, learn to read. And that's not natural to our biology. And children need to be noisy and squirming around and outside. So I think one thing is connect with the outdoors. There's more education in experiencing the trees and learning about the birds and the flowers that is more pertinent in many ways than geometry. Some people need geometry, but not everybody. The other is that we need to honor the aspect of play. Children learn better when there's play involved because that's their natural tendency to play, make it into a game. And even humans, even adults learn better when there's a game to it. That's why the gaming industry is. And so to bring that sense of play and joy back in our education, and then we are not dominating our bodies in order to learn and walking around with heads floating on these inanimate bodies, disconnected from ourselves, disconnected from the planet and from each other.
That makes so much sense. And tying into something that you said during the Renaissance, of course, the aspect of reading. So children had to learn, people had to learn how to read, to be part of the conversation, to be part of shaping the world. Today, now, of course, we are having technology that reshapes our lives and in so many different ways. How do you see that we can use technology to actually enhance and deepen our connection to the divine feminine rather than diminish it?
Yeah, I have also said that technology is the modern printing press. You have to learn technology and deal with it in order to be in the conversation we're having right now. You have to know how to make videos and put them on TikTok or social media. You have to be able to do all that. And unfortunately, it is taking us into a kind of false world in many ways where we're on screens all the time and we're in our phones instead of looking at real things. Of course, we're having a real conversation right now. But I think that technology will amplify whatever the values are of a culture. And so it is a way to bring in the values of the feminine. There's a book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess by Leonard Shlain, very brilliant book, where he was a brain scientist, brain physician, and he looks at right brain and left brain and what happens in different cultures. And when we went to the written word, we went to a more left brain dominance. Left brain is masculine, it's more violent, it's more looks at separations and distinctions. And the right brain is more holistic in its thinking. And what he said, because the printing, your left brain looks at print, your right brain looks at pictures. So and he didn't really live long enough to see like the advent of Zoom that we're doing right now. But what's happening is more and more communication is happening through pictures than text, right? I say sometimes books are very 20th century. And we may look at them like stone tablets with something cumbersome to carry around. And now the medium is video. So that is implying a more holistic feminine side of the brain. So and this happened and even Leonard Shlain talked about it with television. He died before he saw this kind of thing, but television was around. And he said, this is bringing back the whole holistic thinking in the whole brain, because now we're communicating in images more than text. So I think that's one thing that technology is bringing us. And I think with AI, technology is actually going to get a little easier. You can say to AI, create this for me, and it does. There's a lot of dangers with AI, huge dangers. But I think that it'll make the nuts and bolts of doing all the programming easier. And so we can get more into the essence of what we want to communicate. And technology has the ability to unite the whole world. And it is. We can talk to people in China. I can do Zoom calls and talk to people from all over the world. Yeah.
And that's also what, just as a side note, what we're doing with our Women's Circle, Ma Circle. We are looking to expand this online because we have had interest from different places in the world. This would not be possible without technology. And I love what you just said. I had never even put that together in my own mind. Yes, absolutely. Video is a more holistic way of imparting information, communication. The reading is left brain, when we see images, it's also our right brain. Plus, we get to also experience somehow the energy put forth by the images, by the individuals appearing in the images. Thank
It
you for
puts us in our right minds.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. That's actually really powerful to know. Yeah, I love that. And that actually, I love nothing more, many things, but one of my favorite things is learning. I absolutely love when I'm not the smartest person in the room, when I'm not the smartest person on the Zoom, is like my soul, my brain, my heart just opens up. I love learning from those who are already further ahead on a path than I am, or who are immersed in areas that are just not my life,
Yes.
geneticists, physicists. And so that's also where, talk about mentoring. I think mentorship is such an important thing where when we have the capacity to guide others, when so asked, mentorship can profoundly impact personal and also cultural growth. So I'd like to know, how has the divine feminine shaped your approach to mentoring? Because I'm sure you are a mentor to, or have been a mentor to many.
And I have been mentored. The old goddess tradition, that's how it was taught. It was taught from the senior priestesses to the junior priestesses. Children were, from an early age, sometimes brought into what we might now call an ashram, but really the priestess temple. And they were alongside the older women and learning the mysteries, learning the chants and the prayers and the candle lighting and the maintenance of the temple. And the mysteries is all I can say. They cannot be, as much as I want to support my book, they can't really be learned from a book. They are an experience, and they are learned by someone who carries the key to those mysteries. And that was always the role of the priestess, to carry the key to the mysteries, to the other world, to the unseen world. In the old days, when the goddess was revered, that the king was often married to a priestess. So the king ruled the kingdom. He ruled the people and all the mundane things, but he was married to a woman who worked with the other side, who worked with the mystical, who worked with the unseen world, and her advice to him would help him run the kingdom well. And the kingdoms thrived when the king was married to a priestess.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an old relationship that we have lost.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. And I think part of it is not only what the priestess in the relationship with a king, or a mentor in a relationship with a mentee, can teach via words or experiences. I think part of it is also embodiment. And merely by being around somebody who embodies ancient knowledge, ancient codes, who brings a certain beingness into this world, this activates certain things in ourselves as well. And I think that's a forgotten part of learning, to actually step into the frequency, connect with the frequency of somebody who has something that they wish to share and that you wish to be a recipient of.
Neurologists have actually studied this. And what happens when you watch someone doing a movement or something is mirror neurons, that's what they call, they fire up in the brain almost as if you were doing it yourself. So children really do learn by watching. They speak what they hear, they follow the movements of their parents and the people they see around them. And you could watch somebody do yoga and you could learn it more quickly. Yeah, there's a neurological basis to that.
Yes, that makes total sense. Absolutely. There's something else I'm curious about, to digress to a different topic. Having watched this resurgence of the goddess movement, in my mind, it really intersects also with the contemporary feminism.
Yes.
So I'd love your take on how these movements complete each other and also where they diverge.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think there's been various waves of feminism. And I think the first wave was like the suffragettes who said, we want a right to vote. That was only 100 years ago or so. And so that was just give us a right to vote. First democracies in Greece, slaves could vote, anybody could vote, but not women. So they weren't true democracies. We have not had a, true democracy until women got the right to vote. So that was one of the first waves. And then another wave was in the 60s when women who were still in that, my job is to serve the man, to bring him the coffee, to put him ahead of me, to serve the children, to stay home and be small. We took the curlers out of our hair and we burned our bras and we marched in the streets and we said, let us into the workplace. We want to earn our own money. And so in that wave of feminism, women were asking to be let into the world, but it was a man's world. And so they were gradually let into the man's world, and they learned how to behave like men and rise up the corporate ladder. And of course, there's a long way to go before equality. Boards of directors, very few of them have an equal number of men and women, and very few have women CEOs. But the companies that do actually perform better, have lower employee turnover, better stock performance. But women discovered that, I have to be like a man. And for many women, it just was not a fit. They did it for a few years and then they burned out. Men have testosterone to do what we do. We don't have that. We have to do it from our adrenal glands, and we get adrenal fatigue. One of the reasons I did the She Rises is these archetypes of women's leadership, because we do it differently. And so I think the next wave of feminism is bringing the world to a more feminine state, not women masculinizing themselves to enter a man's world, but bringing the missing feminine balance to the global conversation about what kind of world are we creating and how do we do it. For instance, war is not an answer. War does not ever solve conflicts. It creates trauma that goes through the generations. It costs money. It creates suffering. It's never been an answer. So I'm part of something just forming now. We're at the birthing stage, called the Founding Mothers Movement. And we're going to launch the website and the videos and everything on Mother's Day, which is just a couple weeks away. And it's based on the suffragette movement that united peace groups, women's groups, and spiritual groups in a trifecta of unity. And we want to have the mother of all movements to get lots of women's organizations. And basically, we're fighting for women's rights and for peace. And say we are fed up with women who can't let their hair down or go to school, with women who have forced genital manipulation, with women that don't have power to decide their own reproductive choices. Enough. And we're not going to take it anymore. So this is a movement that's starting. So I think this is the next wave of feminism.
Beautiful. I love this so much, Anodea. And I think this is really also the type of vision that you and the other individuals involved in this have. This is the type of vision we need for a world where the divine feminine is fully integrated into our collective consciousness. So you said about 2 weeks from now, this is going to launch. Can you repeat the website name? I'll make sure to put it in
the foundingmothers.world. Foundingmothers.world. And I think the website is up, but we're still working our colors. And it's really a beginning organization, but there's some really high-powered women working on this, and from all over the world. We have someone from Africa and someone from Eastern Europe, and we have people from all over that are part of this, who have been part of women's activism for a long time. So I think it's going to go somewhere.
Oh, wonderful. I have no doubt. And Anodea, for people who would like to learn more about you and connect with you deeper, how can they do so?
I have about 7 websites, but my main clearinghouse website is AnodeaJudith.com. And that's ANODEA, Judith.com. And for my feminine leadership and goddess book, it's also SheRisesMovement.com. which is trying to create a movement out of these feminine archetypes and women awakening their superpowers and being recognized for them for what they do naturally all the time, and having that become a movement of women waking up. So SheRisesMovement.com and AnodeaJudith.com.
Excellent. And again, I'll make sure to put all of this in the show notes. Anodea, it was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for everything you do and you bring into this world. And thank you for raising the divine feminine, doing this most important work. I'm really grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful interview and for understanding who she is, which you obviously do, and her importance. We're coming back home to the goddess, and home is Holy Order of Mother Earth.
Yes, welcome home.
Welcome home.